Oh, okay, awesome. Okay, all right, so it's a little past 6:30. Meeting is going to come to order. Let's all please rise to salute the flag. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our September Revere Board of Health meeting. My name is Dr. Natalie Kong. I'm the chair of the Revere Board of Health. And joining me for tonight's meeting are Dr. Craig Costanza, board member, and then Neza Lawdi, our other board member. Also in attendance are the City of Revere staff, Lauren Buck, who's the Director of Public Health, Michael Wells, Director of Municipal Inspections and Health Agents, and Paula Sepulveda, our administrative assistant. All right, so for tonight's agenda, we're going to start with a public health communicable monthly report from Lauren Buck. Following that, she'll also give us a COVID-19 update. And following that, we'll discuss the current body art regulations, and then to cap off the meeting, we'll be finalizing the beekeeping regulations. Before I hand over the floor to Lauren, I wanted to also let everyone in this room know, and any viewers at home know, that it's widely publicized. I'm also the new chair of, or director of the Department of Health and Human Service for the City of Revere. I am still currently sitting as the chair of the Revere Board of Health until the replacement for me is appointed by the City Council. So I just wanted to make sure everyone in this room and then any viewers at home were aware of that. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to Lauren Buck.
Hi, everyone. So I wanted to give my monthly report for August 2021. I'll start with our non-COVID communicable disease report. We had one confirmed case of norovirus, which is a enteric or foodborne illness. We had 3 confirmed and 1 probable cases of campylobacteriosis, which again is a foodborne or enteric illness. 2 probable cases of hepatitis B. 4 confirmed and 4 probable cases of hepatitis C, and actually 2 cases were revoked. We had 1 probable case of legionellosis, 2 suspected cases of Lyme disease, 1 confirmed case of malaria. This is a case where malaria, this is a person who recently came here from an African country and was first diagnosed with malaria in that country and was treated there. So did not acquire it here in Revere. 2 confirmed cases of shigellosis, which again is a tick-borne disease. 1 suspected cases of tularemia, a tick-borne disease, and 1 suspected cases of varicella. Some other kind of important notes that I wanted to bring to the board's attention. The Department of Public Health has identified, as of today, actually 4 cases. Your report says 3, but today they updated the case count to 4. So 4 human cases of West Nile virus. They're all coming from Middlesex County within the last week and a half. Because of our location in marshland and our location to the positive cases, our West Nile virus risk level, which was previously at low, has been increased to moderate. This is not unexpected with our weather this year. We had a heavy precipitation, hot weather, and so the main species vector has increased in abundance statewide. We actually expect to continue this to increase until we have our first real frost. And so because of that, we obviously took some measures. So our recommended public health measures included raising awareness among residents, which we did via a public input kind of broad email, a update on our revere.org webpage, which there's now a red kind of alert banner. So we did that, reminding residents to use mosquito repellents with an EPA registered active ingredient, to make sure they're aware of peak mosquito activity, which is dawn and dusk. And we have some other suggestions in our website as well. And again, I mentioned we'll continue to be at risk for mosquito-borne illnesses until our first significant frost, so a couple more months at least. So we'll keep an eye on that, and I will continue to update you with any West Nile virus cases as they come up. And then the next thing I wanted to just talk to you about is the CDC. This isn't about a communicable disease, but I thought it was pretty interesting. There's some new research, interesting and alarming, new research that shows that there are more, that diagnosed cases of type 1 and type 2 diabetes are increasing among the youth in the United States. This is not necessarily specific to Revere, but a study that was done in the broader population. From 2001 to 2017, the number of people under age 20 living with type 1 diabetes increased by 45%, and the number living with type 2 diabetes grew by 95%. That's a huge increase. The greatest increase in type 2 diabetes prevalence were seen in youth who were Black or Hispanic. Something to keep on all of our radar screens. Again, not necessarily the most surprising thing in the world, but not necessarily the best health data that we've seen come out. And then finally, I'll end with COVID. These are just these are not a comprehensive update, but we do have an increased total confirmed case count of 11,301. Total deceased to date is 165. Our 7-day average case count as of last week was 18.3. Again, this is in the range that we were around April, May of last year. And our 14-day positivity rate is 4.4%. Some great news on the positivity rate is that we haven't seen it go above 5. This is good news. For the last 3 weeks, it's been pretty steady in the 4s. Hopefully, this is a sign that we are at the peak of our surge, although we're not sure what the winter months hold. But that is some relatively good news in our case count in COVID. So that's all the updates that I have for that.
Thank you, Lauren. Any questions, Neza or Dr. Costanza?
Yes, I actually have a question to Lauren about I don't know if you know, about the, it's gonna take me a minute, but the flu shot season. I know it's every year, but last year, because of the corona, it was mandatory for schools. Is it gonna be the same this year? Because I have some parents asking me questions. I want to make sure that.
Yeah, it's a great question. From what I know, it is not going to be mandated again this year. That can change. That's just what I've been hearing. I don't know if Dr. Kong has any more insight than that.
No, I don't have any more insight. Just a comment that, whether it is mandated, I still believe it's a good idea to get, because we don't know what's going to hold in the winter months with the Delta variant, and as always, it's best to protect our students in the best way we know how, and that is to get vaccinated against the things that we can get vaccinated for, and that is the flu. And thankfully, at this point, for anyone 12 and older, that's also getting vaccinated against the coronavirus. So, everything, whatever it is we can do to keep our students on in-person learning is going to be our priority as a Department of Public Health and obviously as a health board. So I still think that's something that should be encouraged as much as possible. So even though not a mandate, I think it's just a good idea.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with you. And also, I don't know if you heard on the news, they've been saying that this year they expect it to be a very bad flu season. I know probably we hear that every year, but it's said again this year. That's why I was like, I wanted to ask this question since I was approached by a few parents.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it could be a really bad flu season, only because if this year's allergy season is any indication, the fact that we were all inside last spring and not getting exposed to the usual allergens made us hypersensitive. And I think the same immunology principles will apply for the flu this year, where we may not have been as exposed as last year. And that our immune system might be letting its guard down a little bit, or it might be a little bit out of practice because of the winter we had last year. So even more reason, I think, to get our flu shot. I hope it's not going to be a bad season, but I'd rather not test that hypothesis, and I'd rather just get a flu shot and just make sure I'm covered. But that's a really good point to bring up, Neza. Thank you. Any other questions, Craig? Okay, cool. I guess we can move on to the next topic, which is the body art regulations and the changes coming from it. So.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Kong. So in the packets that you all have, you will see the current regulations that were passed back in February 2001. Just a little backstory here. So during COVID, the maintenance of licenses for body art, and body art is defined as not limited to physical body adornment, which includes body piercing, tattooing, cosmetic tattooing, branding, scarification. Also really popular over the last couple of years, which is microblading, micropigmentation. All of that is included in these regulations. So during COVID, because our complete attention was focused on COVID, we were not able to regularly renew a lot of the licenses that are out there in facilities in Revere. So we have kind of started the process of updating updating the process of how we do this. Prior to COVID, it was done mostly on paper, and we're looking to update our application unless there's any objections from the board, and then also to put it on like a web server. Mike and I were talking about either using Laserfiche or CitizenServe. Both of those are like web-based applications that the city has access to. So the application would be on there for all of the establishments and individual practitioners to access, and then we would schedule inspections with the hope that we would be starting the 2022 kind of year as the new renewal year, and so then every year in January everything would be renewed, with the knowledge that these last 2 years have really we've been unable to effectively, I'd say, renew and license like we should have been doing, during COVID. So again, the first packet in your pamphlet is the current regulations, which I couldn't find any cities that have really updated regulations, although these are from 2001, and that's 20 years old now. I couldn't find any really updated things to the regulations, so we're just going to update the permit application, which you have an example of for both types of permits that we have here in the city. One is for the establishment itself. The other is for the individual practitioner. They both have different fee scales and different renewal kind of structures, but we'll be putting these online unless, again, there's an objection from anyone on the board.
A quick question, Lauren. So they would have to get both the establishment itself and then every practitioner within the establishment needs this one too? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And on the 2001, the fees are here $300 for the practitioner for every 2 years, and then $200 for the establishment itself every year. And that's going to change? Oh, sorry, that's going to be the same?
That's going to be the same unless Mike has any objection to the current fee structure. I don't know.
I have no objection to the current fee structure. This is 20 years old, so
Yeah.
We might have to do a study to see what current fees are out there from surrounding communities.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it has the potential to go up, but I'm okay leaving it the way it is too, at least for now, while we're trying to prioritize getting everything online. I do like the idea of having everything put online because the pandemic has obviously challenged us in a lot of unique ways, and being able to, put a lot of our operations online is good for record keeping, but it's also good for, just the current times that we're in with the pandemic and the Delta variant still raging. I think it makes a lot of sense to move everything to an online format. I think it also, in thinking about it from the establishment and the practitioner perspective, I think it's easier to just look online and see what is it do I need to fill out, what information I need to have. So it seems to be very user-friendly from a lot of perspectives. Neza and Craig, any follow-up questions you have to that?
No, I'm good.
I mean, I am in agreement with moving everything to online, so my vote is for a yes for that. Neza and Craig?
Yeah, my vote is yes also.
Yes.
All right, so we'll start to upload all of these things online, and then Lauren, you said for January 2022, that's when we're going to start to renew everyone,
Yeah.
understanding that the pandemic
Yeah.
had a lot of challenges, and I don't think anyone blames you or anyone else for not keeping up with this.
Yeah, the goal is to be able to have January as like a kind of a renewal date so that every January we can start renewing again, like we, and keep up with it that way.
Mike, I'm assuming we're going to have information going out to all the necessary businesses to let them know?
Yep, Lauren actually has all of the contacts for the current establishments, and we would typically send a letter out in November, letting them know of the renewal policy for their current license, and then they'll, which will be great this year, if we're going to put it online, they'll be able to go right online and take care of it.
You guys are always 3 steps ahead of me. You guys always have the answers already figured out like months ago. I don't even know why I bother asking the questions anymore. You are, exactly. All right, so if there are no other questions about the body art regulations, let's move on to the last item on the agenda, and that's the beekeeping regulation.
Yeah, this is the one where we definitely need to spend the most time, and I will say we have Damien here, who is our city bee expert, which is good. If you guys have any questions, hopefully he'll be able to help us answer some of them, and some of them hopefully we can answer. Paula, Mike, and I actually were able to go visit Damien at one of his hives, which was really great. So I want to give you all background again. The city council passed an ordinance in May of this year regarding urban agriculture, and beekeeping is just one component of that ordinance. So that ordinance has already been passed through. You will see in your packet that it is included in your packet. The title is an ordinance establishing rules and regulations for urban agriculture, accessory residential farming, community gardens, farming, all that stuff. So as dictated by the ordinance, we as a Board of Health, or you as a Board of Health, are now required to produce regulations surrounding that ordinance. And that is what we are talking about tonight, the regulations. If you flip the page, the next packet of papers in your folder is the Revere Board of Health regulations that we're proposing to talk about tonight. There are some edits in it that we should talk about. If you all agree on the edits, hopefully we can vote on the regulations. If not, we can always go back and redraft. These were originally kind of constructed, I believe, and this was before I got here, so Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, by looking at a lot of other cities who currently have these. Places like Cambridge and Somerville have beekeeping regulations already in place, and so we look to them to help write these with the help of Paul Capizzi. Then what we did is we talked to some experts, the Urban Farming Committee and Damien, about the regulations to see how they can be kind of, I don't know, crafted to suit Revere. And that's where we are now with the regulations that have edits in red. They're pretty long, these regulations, and so I could try to quickly summarize them if that would be helpful to you all. And then we can talk about some of the edits that Mike and I made to see what you all think about them. Would that be helpful?
If it's okay with you, I would love to hear a brief summary.
Okay.
Is that okay? Okay, yeah.
Okay. So the first part of the regulations are just definitions. So I'm actually going to skip right to section 4, which is requirements. It's on page 2. The first couple of things are pretty consistent with all of the guidelines, the current regulations that are out there. You know, they have to be in compliance with all federal, state, and local laws. They cannot be keeping bees in a manner that's a nuisance. And then I want to direct your attention to section 4D, E, and F. So in these regulations, anyone keeping bees would need to follow the Massachusetts Beekeepers Association's best management practices, which hopefully once this application goes online, and again, we would put this application online, we can have links to all of these things right in there, just in case anyone would need to see where they are. E is you need to demonstrate that you have completed a beekeeper training course, which they are, as Damien has told us, the state does offer courses like this, and they're usually offered in the winter. which is another reason why we're trying to get these regulations implemented now, in case anyone wants to start in the spring, they would have time to take the course, the appropriate course. It's like a 6-week-ish course, yeah. And then section F is all of the beehives, which is apiaries, would need to be registered with the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources, which is, the link is in the regulations. And section 5 goes to standards. Number of beehives is the first standard, so no more than 2 beehives are allowed on a lot. Part 2 is talking about if there was ever an emergency situation, the maximum number of beehives may be increased to no more than 4 on a temporary basis for the purpose of rescuing, exactly like I said, it mentioned like an emergency where you had to rescue a swarm or to accommodate a division of a bee colony, which is something that the experts know a little bit more. You know, they could, maybe Damien could explain to you why that would need to happen. And then one of the things Mike and I added in is that we would just need to be alerted if there was any change to the number of beehives at a location. So that's one edit that we made. Ground level beehives shall be constructed at least 5 inches off the ground using industry standard methods. Section 3 talks about that the fact that all the beehives need to be marked with contact information. Section 4 talks about eligibility of property. This is something that Mike and I also added in just to try to make sure that the properties where these are going are really conducive to beehives, and also make sure that the residents around the area are also considered and all that stuff. So we are proposing that we make sure that the hives go at an owner-occupied residency, a single-family rental property with the owner permission, and that they wouldn't be allowed in a non-owner occupied multi-family dwelling, like an apartment complex essentially, is something like that. Part B talks about flyway control. This is some technical stuff about, you know, signage, about where they could go. So I'll basically summarize it by saying there are certain locations where the beehive, there would need to be signage on shared property, on, you know, public streets, parks, grounds, you know, signage would have to be posted, and, you know, following the guidelines here. Part C talks about, again, placement within a yard, at least 5 feet from any property line. Maybe closer if there's a solid fence or wall separating from abutting property. Part D talks about care and maintenance, so spills and byproducts would have to be removed regularly to help exclude pests. Bees would need to have water, fresh water daily. Section 6 talks about permitting. So every beehive, once these are passed, would need to have a permit from the Board of Health, and they would need to be following all public health regulations.
Lauren, before you move on to section 7, could I actually ask some questions about the other sections you went
Sure.
over? Before like I forget them. The beekeeper training course, is there some sort of like certificate that they need to produce and show us so that we know that they successfully finished it?
Do you get a,
Yeah, I think that any beekeeper school
Great, I'm sorry, Damien, you mind just going up to the podium?
yeah, and turn on the mic, so.
Yeah, there's a button at the bottom, and when this little guy flashes red, you're on. Hold on.
Hi, my name is Damien DeMarco. I am a resident of 202 Prospect Avenue, and I've been a beekeeper for 5 years in the city. I have 2 beehives in my backyard, and I also have maintained 2 beehives for the community garden in Revere at Point of Pines for the last 3 years. Generally speaking, I went to bee school myself. They are readily available through different beekeeper associations, but also through some private companies, beekeeper companies as well. So, any beekeeper school or any student of a beekeeper course could very easily get a letter from either the association or the person that was giving the beekeeper that verifying that, yes, they did, complete the training and what the training was comprised of.
How much does it usually cost to?
Well, it depends. It's between, generally around between $80 and maybe $150.
Okay. And then the next point is that they should, apiaries need to be registered with the Mass Department of Agriculture. Is there a fee associated with?
No.
Okay, so that's going to be free. Awesome. And my other question was, actually, no, I think my question was answered later on when, in the apiary placement section. I guess my next question is actually for Lauren and Mike then. So for folks who are going to keep beehives, are we also going to be talking later about the permit process then? This is section 6, the permit required. I just had a question about that.
Yeah. I'll go over section 7, and then also included in your packet are initial drafts of what the kind of licensing looks like, permitting licensing. The applications, there's 3. There's the initial application, the renewal, and if you wanted to apply for a variance.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, Damien, while I have you, my last question, I just remembered it. The size of a beehive, I looked at the definition in the packet here, and it just says like it's a structure intended for housing one bee colony. Is this a standard size, like one bee colony? Is it like always like a standard size, or are there variances in the size of a beehive?
Well, there are different types of beehives, but the dominant beehive in pretty much standard considered for beekeepers is something called the Langstroth hive, and it is basically as big as a bedroom lighting table. So you have a light on the side of your bed. That's kind of the size of it.
So like a nightstand?
So basically there's different frames, there's different structures that get stacked as the beehive grows. A beehive will swell and shrink during the season. So as the number of bees get more populous in the hive, you need to provide more space for the bees. So you basically put another drawer on top of the beehive.
Okay.
Now,
So
generally
it grows
speaking,
taller, not
yeah, so
wider.
it goes taller. There are vertical hives, there are horizontal hives as well, but they're probably as big as a hope chest. And they're not expandable. So basically, that's the size of the horizontal hive. And you sort of use the space inside the horizontal hive to expand the beehive or to shrink the beehive.
How tall can these get?
They can get very tall. However, I think for a hobbyist, I know in my particular situation, they've never been more than maybe 4 feet. So probably, let's see, maybe 2 or 3 boxes. Okay.
Okay.
And the reason is that the bees die in the wintertime. So you do see hives generally in the south where they don't have a frost, and they're huge. They're 8, 9, 10 feet tall. But that doesn't happen here in the Northeast because most of the bees die in the wintertime. Okay. And that's a huge problem for beekeepers, especially for hobbyists. I've had, over the years, 10 hives over 5 years, and only 1 survived over 1 winter. So when they die in the winter, you need to kind of start them all up over again. And they just don't have the time to get really big.
Gotcha, okay. And then Lauren, Mike, any consideration on having like a more specific definition of the size of a beehive?
Yeah, great question, and I'm glad you brought that up. Written into the ordinance, so not in our regulations, but the ordinance itself, is a very strict definition of size, and it states a freestanding beehive shall be no greater than 20 cubic feet in volume, and the maximum height of the beehive shall be 5 feet. So that is included in the ordinance itself, which is consistent with what Damien mentioned.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to stop talking and let you finish then, because it seems like my questions will be answered.
No,
by you
that was a
briefly.
great question, though. I'm glad you brought that
I
up.
actually have a quick question. I'm not sure it was answered, or maybe I missed it. Are you guys required, once you go through, I believe you said it was 6 weeks class? Are they going to be required to present a certificate? Did you say
Yes,
yes?
yes.
I wasn't, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, Damien said that
Oh, okay.
whoever's giving the class can provide a letter, some sort of document that
Okay.
the person has successfully completed the 6-week course, so.
And there'll be a place, again, if, hopefully this is all going to be going on either CitizenServe or Laserfiche, where someone could upload it, essentially, the certificate. Okay, so now, just moving on to Section 7, permit application requirements. Section 7 details what is required on the permit, and it's all of the things that are required are on the draft initial application as well. It's things like contact information, obviously. If the place where the Beehive is going is not, the Beehive is not owned by the person who wants the Beehive, then you need a signature from the owner of the property. It also includes a place where you can upload a scaled version of what the structure is going to look like, a written description. And it also makes you, included in the application is a place where you would need to have contact information of a backup beekeeper. In case there was ever something that happened to you, we'd be able to contact the backup. And then the permit application fee is going to be, with the approval of the board, would be $50. Renewal would be $25, and variance would be $25 as well. And then the one section that we added in, Mike and I, again, talked about, in order for timing to work out, and after consulting with Damien, we'd want everyone who wanted to keep bees in the summer to let us know by March. So we hope that, we thought that having applications due by March 1st of every year would help to make sure that this was for serious beekeepers, so they wouldn't be starting behind the 8 ball and we'd have to do inspections, during the time when they would be most active. So we added that in. Section 8 talks about variances, and this is really just someone who didn't feel like they would be able to meet the requirements would be able to apply for a variance that you as the Board of Health would be able to discuss and see if you wanted to approve it. And that application is very simple. I think it's the last one where it's basically you're just going to be like, what is the variance? We will contact you. And then we could potentially have a hearing or talk about it with the person. Section 9 talks about renewals. Renewals will be annual, and we just basically took out the 45 days before expiration date and made it again March 1st of each year. Section 10 is notification. So this is something that Mike and I discussed with Damien. Initially, the regulation requires notification of abutters of a property. And as you can see, the draft we have crosses out abutters and includes just the owner of the property. Again, the owner of the property in many cases would be the beekeeper himself or him or herself, sorry. Or the owner would have to sign off on the application permitting anyway. With the thought that, and again, Damien could probably be more eloquent in the way that he says this, bees are not necessarily something that a neighbor would even know about if they're kept well. And there is a lot of fear about bees in general. Maybe some, maybe not justified fear. And so potentially this could be a huge hindrance of someone getting approved because abutters might be very against it for maybe not necessarily scientific or justified reasons. And again, that's something that you all can discuss, but in our draft, the abutters was taken out of the notification process and in the hearing process, which is section 11. So 11 talks about hearings for all applications, and section 12 is enforcement and violations. Section 13 is inspection. 14 is obviously if there's a health hazard, we would be making sure that we would immediately remove the beehive. Section 15 is penalties. Section 16 is severability, and then section 17 is if you're gonna sign them, signing them. So I know I breezed over those last ones, but I think really the main component is that we made some changes to the notification and hearing, just that abutters wouldn't necessarily need to be included in that process. That's something that you all can decide if you want to, move forward with.
Lauren, I don't know if you had mentioned this already, but when does the licensing, application period begin for beekeeping? I know it's due by March 1st, but when do we open up the application? Is it January as well?
So I think they'd be open as soon as we could get them up.
Okay.
I don't necessarily think there's a couple of month window. Everything would have to be, for that year, for that summer, everything would have to be done by March 1st.
Okay, gotcha. So renewals can come in as early as I'm just wondering, is there a time, is basically doing a renewal in April 1st for the next year, is that too early? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Is that
Damien,
too
do you have any insight into if someone would know if they wanted to do it as early as that next year?
Right, because the example is okay, the license is due March 1st, so
Yeah,
someone
no,
gets it
I-
in February 20th, and then all of a sudden they're well, I love beekeeping, let me just put it in by April. Is there such thing as having a renewal come in too early? Is there a benefit to waiting?
No, generally, there's a beekeeping season, and that has to do with generally the end of frost and the beginning of frost. So if you certainly can install a beehive before, you wouldn't install a beehive before March 1st. It's too cold, the bees would die. And the bees are pretty expensive. It's $200 for a package of bees. So generally speaking, you do it at least, probably the earliest would be after St. Patrick's Day. So I think March 1st would be perfectly good, and that, a beekeeper would be getting prepared to, you have to order your bees early, in November.
Oh, okay.
So they would know way before that they were either intending to have a beehive that year or not. And if they had bees in their hive, and another thing too is that you could have bees in your hive and then they could die April 1st.
Oh.
So in that particular case, you'd have to order more. So I think March 1st is a pretty good.
Yeah. I guess
deadline.
my example was they got approved before March 1st, and they have their first hive, putting it down in April, and then say in May, they still have their first hive, but they're oh, but I'm definitely going to order bees in November, so I'm going to just apply on May 1st of this year for the next year.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't. I mean, generally speaking, come December with the snow, beekeeping season shuts down, and that's when they would plan for the next year. So I don't think anybody would be that, enthusiastic about that. I'm just going to continue to do this. We have until March 1st to do it. I think that's pretty reasonable.
Okay, so do you think it's worth it to encourage folks to to say the application, so not for this year, because this is the first year, so I don't think we need to do this, but say for the first year, so 2022, this application's due by March 2022. For the 2023 beekeeping season, if you want to renew, should the start date for renewal be the fall, after Labor Day maybe?
Dr. Kong, I would recommend that we keep it in line with every other license, where we start the renewal process in November, December, for the January 1st effective date of the license. So in this particular case, we could probably start the renewal process in January, leading up to March 1st start date.
Gotcha. Okay. So then for this year, then I guess we could do that. We could say applications open January 1, due March 2022. And then for the renewal, same thing. Renewal applications open January 1st, 2023, due March 1st, 2023. Okay. Yeah. I'm just kind of trying to think and predict like any issues that might come up. And, I don't know anything about beekeeping, so I don't know if anyone's super zealous and it's like, I'm going to get my application for next year in right now, so it might be good to have some sort of order to it. Neza and Craig, any questions?
Just for my general knowledge, are butters alerted when there's a new beekeeper, and has there been any resistance? Like, how does that whole situation work?
So remember, this is a new regulation for the city. So prior to us implementing this, the urban farming ordinance wasn't, like codified. Now it is. So right now, no. No, the answer to that is the butters are not notified because we don't have regulations. These are the regulations that we're writing that we'll have to follow from here on out. I think Damien could probably speak more to the abutters situation, so I'll give him a little bit of time.
Okay, so if you look at the definition of abutter on page 1, it says it's not just your adjacent neighbors, it's anyone that is within 300 feet of any of your property lines. 300 feet. Now, I live up on Prospect Ave, and my entire lot is 50 feet. So 300 feet would be my neighbor, who's got a 50-foot lot as well, my second neighbor, my third, 4 neighbors up and 4 neighbors down. That's pretty much my whole block. Then it would be my neighbor in the back, that's 50 feet. And then my neighbor on Suffolk Ave on the other side of the street, plus probably that neighbor next to him, plus that neighbor next to him. If we go on the other side of me, it's my neighbor across the street on Prospect Ave. He's got a 50-foot lot. And it would be somebody on Reservoir Ave who abuts his property. We're talking maybe 12, 14, 16 properties that would be abutters according to this definition. People I don't even know. And as Lauren mentioned, one of the big obstacles to urban beekeeping is this whole public bee paranoia. People are just frightened to death of bees. So I think if that were the case, more than likely, I don't know who's going to send out 16 registered letters, but more than likely, at least 8 or even 10 of them would come back with a no. They don't know me. They don't know anything about beekeeping. I don't want any bees around here. So that's part of the problem. So I think if there is an issue, then with the placement of a beehive and its appropriateness, that should be the determination of the Board of Health. When the person submits the permit with the plan, and even, you can just look the property up on Google Maps, and even if that's not possible, even with a quick site visit, they're the ones that can say, yes, this is a good site, or no, it's not a good site. It shouldn't be somebody that I don't know 2 streets away from me.
That makes a lot of sense. And Craig, on page 6, the notifications, that's the edit that we had made. We had crossed out abutters because we think that by having to go through that whole rigorous process that Damien just pointed out, it would be a large deterrence, and we may actually not get anyone who wants to go through that, or if they try to go through that, they may come across more no's than yeses. So I guess another follow-up question to that, Damien, you've obviously owned bees for how long?
5 years.
5 years now? Does-
And interestingly enough, my neighbors on either side of me just discovered them after 5 years.
Yeah.
So that's how, if they're placed in the right spot, you don't notice them. Nobody knows them. My neighbor next to me has a pool, and he literally sits 15 feet from my hive, and he's never noticed them for 5 years.
Yeah.
So the right placement of the beehive is
Yeah.
essential for having this be a successful hobby.
Yeah.
Now, it's not appropriate in every spot in Revere, absolutely not. But there are people that have big yards in Revere, in West Revere, certainly up the hill where I am, people on the other side of me got huge yards. So I think it's, again, should be the determination of the Board of Health to say, yes, that's an appropriate site for a hive, or no, it isn't.
Neza, did you have any questions? I had another one, but I don't want to take up too much time. I actually had this is kind of just curiosity for me. So you've had bees for 5 years. I guess, why do you keep bees? What's the benefit? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's just a fun hobby. It keeps you outside. It's in the sun. Doesn't involve any electricity. Bees are quiet. You don't need to feed them. They go off and forage. And it's just a very interesting kind of way for me to see sort of a whole biological environment that I would never even know about. And they're really pretty fascinating insects.
Do you have like a garden that they also help to
Yeah,
pollinate?
my garden, literally, my beehives are there and my garden is right there. I mean, I am literally in that garden all the time. The bees very rarely sting me when I'm in the garden. Okay, once in a while, not really. They generally only when I'm taking apart the hives to inspect them, then that's when they get a little bit angry with me. But otherwise, they're perfectly fine. I mean, I literally sow the garden, plant my plants, I weed, I water them. I'm literally 2 feet away from the hive. And unless you're really standing in front of the hive and you're blocking them coming in and out, they totally ignore you.
Do you or do other beekeepers produce honey from these bees?
Yes.
Is that something common?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I've in 5 years, when they die over the wintertime, they don't have the opportunity to build up in enough mass. Now, the honey is for them to eat. It's not for us. So it's only when they overwinter. That's when they tend to come out and they get to be really big come May and with the spring flowers, and that's when they build up. And now there's another nectar flow, as they call it, in the fall. Now, we've gotten a lot of rain, so it should be really very good. So there should be a lot of flora for them to forage for a fall honey.
Gotcha. But I guess in this part of the world, because they don't survive the winter, we don't get a lot of honey from the bees that are kept here then?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Sorry, I'm just asking, since what you were just saying, since we have winters here and they don't survive the winter, essentially there's not really a lot of honey produced by the bees. Is that what you said?
No, there could be up to 50 pounds per hive, okay? But again, it all depends on, in my experience, it all depends if they overwinter. If they die, and they do die for different reasons, if they're not big enough, they basically don't hibernate, they cluster like penguins. So if there's a big enough colony, then they surround the queen and they keep her warm. And as the winter, goes on, obviously the colony gets smaller and smaller because they die off, they freeze. If it's a small colony to begin with, then obviously there isn't enough critical mass for them to survive. I've opened hives up in the springtime, in March, and I've seen clusters the size of a baseball.
Oh,
And so they can get really, really pretty small, and they've overwintered. In a beehive, it takes 3 weeks for a bee to emerge, and it takes 3 weeks for a bee to die. So you've got this kind of world population thing going on in the hive. If the queen lays more eggs, and makes more bees, then the bees die off, then the hive gets bigger. If the queen doesn't lay enough eggs, and they start to, they die off, then the hive gets smaller and smaller.
That is very cool. Now I feel like I'm
Yeah.
getting off topic. This is really interesting.
I
Okay,
have a
cool.
question.
All
I
right.
have
Oh, go ahead.
Question. I know you said you've been doing this for 5 years.
Yes.
And I'm just going to ask the same question Dr. Khan just asked, pretty much different way. And I know you just said that the honey is for the bees to
Yes,
eat.
yes.
But my question is, do you get to enjoy some of that honey with you and
Yes.
your family,
Well,
or even sell some of it
Yes,
and make a
and-
profit?
In 5 years, for the first time, I was able to put a little stand out at the farmer's market. So,
I know, because over the years, we've been buying a lot of, I'm personally been buying a lot from the farmer's market on Fridays here, so that's
so,
why.
and I think a lot of the citizens got a real kick out of the fact that this was real local Revere honey.
That is really cool. I love
Yeah.
that.
Thank you.
All right, so now to get us back on topic. Sorry, guys. Okay, thanks, Lauren, for going over all the regulations, regulations. I was kind of reviewing the stuff in red and also asking any follow-up questions. I don't believe I have any more questions. Craig and Neza, any questions on the edits, particularly the stuff in red that Lauren and Mike are proposing for the new Revere beekeeping regulations?
Dr. Kong, I think Damien has one more point.
Yeah, I do have one question, actually, Lauren and Michael have worked very hard on this, Paula's worked very hard on this, and I think this is very solid. I do have one question, though. On page 7, section D. So if there is an issue, then it says BOH determines the keeping of bee poses a health risk to the public or to persons who live directly adjacent to the property where beekeeping is proposed, BOH shall consider evidence of such risk. Health risk shall mean the likely possibility of physical or mental injury or harm to one or more persons caused by the keeping of bees. I don't quite, what is mental injury caused by keeping of bees? I think that's,
But it's hard to define. It's hard to-
Anxiety, maybe?
Yeah. It's a little
so that, again, I think that leads me back to that whole concept of
And that kind
this
of, that
public,
was, I saw that myself
public
too.
bee paranoia.
Yeah,
So if somebody is just crazy afraid for no rational reason, then that could be a factor in having a beekeeper get his hives pulled from his property.
Should we remove the mental injury?
Now, I can understand physical, if somebody says, okay, so my child gets anaphylaxis in the past, they've been stung by a bee, and then that's perfectly fine, and that's a legitimate, but I'm not so sure about mental injury. I know that other cases that I've heard in other communities, Cambridge, Somerville, people have kind of were able to, through this whole process, get beekeepers' hives removed because they didn't feel comfortable having bees, in proximity to them.
Yeah, great. Thanks for bringing that up, Damien. So I'm going to say this is something that you guys can decide if you want to keep it in or not. That isn't a section that we made an edit to. So that was how the previous regulations were written. But you are able to make amendments in any section. So I would say definitely warrants a discussion.
I mean, I think the other consideration to Damien is that I guess the Board of Health is going to weigh in on whether or not physical and/or mental injury is enough to revoke the variance or revoke the permit too. I think we can take this one of two ways. We can either remove the word mental and just keep it at physical.
Yeah, that would be super.
Or, we can, it's going to be up to the board anyway to vote. It won't be just like you have, anxiety or fear, then that's an automatic no. It would be a discussion among the board members.
And again, I understand, we live in Revere, people are very close to each other, and it's not uncommon for people to be, have issues with neighbors. And this could be the perfect way for one neighbor to get back at another and say, I have a problem, I've got anxiety, the person's got bees, they need to go.
What do you guys think?
And that's the only reason why I had mentioned it, because it is a touchy issue.
Do you think it should be, we should remove the mental? Because like I said, there are one or two ways we can go. First is we remove it altogether and just say physical harm, or we can leave it there and it ends up being a Board of Health issue where we kind of discuss anyway and discuss, is this enough to revoke a license? Is this not
Well-
enough to revoke a variance?
Now, there's a case already on Reservoir Ave where a neighbor is very uncomfortable with a person's beehive. And this could be a way for that neighbor to get back at the person and have them remove the beehive. So we already have a case, we already know of a case.
Yeah, so I'd say, again, I think you're right, Dr. Kong. There's two ways to interpret this, right? One of the ways is that someone could present to us that there's a mental health risk. You would have to determine if that is a valid rationale. That's the thought process behind keeping it in. But again, it's something that you all can decide whether
Yeah.
it should stay or not.
We can either decide to take it out or keep it in and then leave the door open for us to have discussions on a case-by-case basis, or again, take it out. Because the opposing argument is that folks may use this as a back channel for other reasons. There are folks who may use it for legitimate reasons and think that this is a legitimate reason, but there is a possibility that folks will use it as a back channel to, get back at a neighbor or something. So, do you guys, I don't know, like, what are you guys thinking? Should we keep it out? Should we leave it in?
My issue is I don't know, the mental word, I don't know if we can change that word and use a different word, because there is a lot of degrees in anxieties, and I agree with you totally. People are gonna get back to people with that, and they're gonna use anything. They can even use physical risks too, different ways. But my issue is, I've seen, and you're a doctor, you know more than I do, there is a lot of degrees in anxieties, and there is some severe anxieties, and not because they've been stung by a bee before or something. That's the only issue I have. If we take it off completely, then
Yeah, but that's the other thing too, is if you have an anxiety issue and you remove the bees, it might not fix the anxiety issue. We're just causing kind of, we're taking away a beehive from one owner, whether property owner or someone who has gotten permission from the owner of the property. We're taking it away, but we're not causing any benefit to that other person's anxiety. It's hard to define. It's really hard to, as a provider, it's hard to define, and oftentimes anxiety and fear is the culmination of many things and not just one thing that you can point to, like a beehive. Oftentimes, this is not 100%. Nothing in medicine is ever 100%. So that's the only part that I'm struggling. Otherwise, the rest of it, I'm actually quite okay with, and I'm totally fine with the rest of all the changes in red that Mike and Lauren have worked on. I think it's hard to define the word mental, and because it's hard to define, it would be really hard to make decisions on whether or not something constitutes mental injury. I kind of want to take it out and keep physical injury, and then we can take things on a case-by-case basis, because residents can still bring up a nuisance complaint, and that's something that falls under our purview. So they can still bring up a nuisance complaint for these bees, like, I don't like it for X, Y, and Z reasons. So it's not like we're shutting the door completely.
yeah, are we gonna keep the last sentence though? Like, if we take the mental injury, are we gonna keep the or harm to one?
We'll keep
Or
the
more
rest,
than-
we'll keep the
we'll
rest
keep
of the
the rest?
sentence. Yeah, we'll keep the whole sentence, except
Yeah.
just change the word, so it will.
Take the mental injury.
Yeah,
off.
we'll take away the phrase "or mental injury," so it'll just read "possibility of physical injury or harm to one or more persons caused by keeping of bees." I think that would be the proposed, because, again, it's hard to define the link of mental injury to just the beehive alone, and they can still have other channels, like bringing up a nuisance complaint, So it's not like by taking that phrase, those two words out, we're shutting the door to having someone file some sort of complaint against the beekeeper and the bees. So they have other channels to do it. I just think this is muddying the current regulations by keeping that wording there. That's my opinion, but I'd love to hear yours as
So
well.
how would you word it again?
So I
Yeah.
think the new sentence is going to read, health risk shall mean the likely possibility of physical injury or harm to one or more persons caused by keeping of bees. That's going to be the new sentence. So I'm getting rid of the two words or mental.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm okay with that.
Is that, you're good?
Yeah.
Everyone else good on that side?
Yep, so I just, we will make the adjustments and then get the new final edited version to you all next month to sign, if you all vote on that one change. I think that's how we should do it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so then we're gonna, so we're gonna.
Actually, maybe I'll make the adjustments, and next month, I'll bring you the final edited version
To
that you
sign.
can vote on at that, with the discussion that you had tonight kept in
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah,
Does that work?
yeah, that's fine, yeah, we can basically sign it,
Right.
or vote on.
We'll put it
officially
at the
vote on-
first thing on the agenda, and you can all just
Yeah.
vote and sign. Okay,
Yeah, we can vote and sign next month, when we see the final copy of everything changed.
perfect.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you so much, Damien.
Thank you, everyone. Ran a little bit over time, but I think that was worth it. Mike, I can't remember how to close the meetings. You'll tell me. Oh, motion to adjourn. Yeah, all right, we're good.
Oh.